The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty saloon in Abilene, Kansas, and Elizabeth Hartford stepped down onto the sun-baked street with nothing but a carpetbag, a forged marriage certificate, and a heart full of desperate lies. It was June of 1873, and she had traveled nearly 800 miles from St. Louis under the pretense of being a mail-order bride to a wealthy cattle rancher. But the truth was far more complicated than that. The real bride had died of cholera 2 weeks before the scheduled departure, and Elizabeth, working as a seamstress in the same boarding house, had seen an opportunity to escape her own troubles and seized it without thinking of the consequences. The heat pressed down on her like a heavy quilt as she stood there in her traveling dress, watching the stagecoach pull away in a cloud of red dust. The main street of Abilene stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that seemed to shimmer in the afternoon sun. Cowboys lounged against hitching posts, their spurs catching the light. The smell of horses, leather, and something cooking drifted on the hot breeze. She clutched her bag tighter and tried to remember the name on the papers. James Mitchell. A cattle rancher who needed a wife to help run his household. A man she had never met and who was expecting someone else entirely. Her conscience had been screaming at her for 2 weeks, but what choice did she have? Her father's gambling debts had fallen to her after his death, and the men he owed were not patient or kind. Coming west had seemed like the only way to disappear, to start over, to survive. She would simply have to make this work somehow, though she had no idea how to run a household, let alone a ranch. She had spent her entire 22 years in the city, sewing dresses for women who barely acknowledged her existence. Miss Hartford. A deep voice cut through her anxious thoughts, and she turned to see a man approaching. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath a worn Stetson. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the prairie, and they studied her with an expression she could not quite read. He wore dusty work clothes, a faded blue shirt rolled up at the sleeves, and carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Yes," she managed, her throat suddenly dry. "Are you Mr. Mitchell?" Something flickered across his face, a hesitation that made her stomach drop. "James Mitchell died 3 weeks ago," he said, and his voice carried genuine sorrow. "Thrown from his horse, broke his neck. I'm sorry you came all this way for nothing." The world seemed to tilt beneath Elizabeth's feet. Dead. The man she was supposed to marry was dead, and she was stranded in a town where she knew no one, with barely enough money for a meal, let alone passage back to St. Louis. And she could not go back anyway, not with those men waiting for her. She felt the color drain from her face. The cowboy reached out and steadied her elbow. "Easy now. When did you last eat?" "This morning," she lied. It had been yesterday. He did not look convinced. "Come on, let me buy you dinner and we can figure out what to do. I'm Cole Bennett. I worked for Mitchell, managed his ranch. I feel responsible, seeing as nobody thought to send you a telegram." Elizabeth wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but practicality won out. She nodded and let him guide her toward a restaurant across the street. The place was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread. Cole pulled out a chair for her, and she sat gratefully, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. He ordered roast beef, potatoes, and coffee for both of them, and when the food came, Elizabeth had to force herself not to eat too quickly. Cole watched her with those observant eyes, and she felt exposed, as though he could see right through her careful facade. "So what will you do now?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. "I do not know," she admitted, because there seemed little point in pretending otherwise. "I have no way back, and even if I did," she trailed off, not wanting to reveal too much, running from something. It was not an accusation, just a quiet observation. She met his gaze and saw no judgment there, only understanding. Maybe he was running from something too. Everyone who came west seemed to be. "Yes," she said simply. He nodded slowly, turning his coffee cup in his hands. Mitchell's ranch goes to his sister back east. She is sending someone to sell it off. I have been saving for years to buy my own place, and I just put money down on a spread about 10 miles north of here. Not big, maybe 200 acres, but it has water and good grass. I am moving cattle out there next week. Elizabeth was not sure why he was telling her this, but she listened, grateful for the distraction from her own panic. Thing is, Cole continued, and now he looked almost uncomfortable, a man running a ranch alone has a hard time of it. I need help with the house, the cooking, all the things I am not particularly good at. And a woman alone out here has an even harder time. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I know this is going to sound crazy, seeing as we just met, but you need a place and I need help. If you were willing, we could make this arrangement work. Proper marriage, legal and all. I am not proposing anything inappropriate. Elizabeth stared at him, her heart hammering. He was offering her exactly what she had come for, but with complete honesty instead of the deception she had planned. It was absurd, it was impulsive, it was possibly her only option. You do not know anything about me, she said slowly. I know you are brave enough to travel 800 miles to marry a stranger, he replied. I know you are honest enough not to pretend everything is fine when it is not. That is more than a lot of folks can say. He leaned forward slightly. Look, I am not expecting love or anything like that, just partnership, mutual help. We would be starting fresh together, both of us. I do not know how to be a wife, she said, the words tumbling out nervously before she could stop them. She felt her cheeks flush. I mean, I can sew, but I cannot cook much, and I have never run a household or done any of the things a ranch wife would need to do. I would be useless to you. Cole smiled then, a genuine warm smile that transformed his serious face and made her breath catch. We'll learn together then, he said simply. I am not exactly an expert at being a husband either. Never thought I would be getting married this year at all, to be honest. But sometimes life throws you in a direction you did not expect, and you just have to trust it might work out. Something in his words, in the calm steadiness of his presence, made Elizabeth feel like maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. It was insane. It was the second desperate gamble she had made in as many weeks. But Cole Bennett seemed like a good man, and good men were not easy to find. All right, she said quietly. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 2 days later by a circuit preacher in a simple ceremony at the church on the edge of town. Elizabeth wore the best dress she had, a pale blue cotton that she had sewn herself, and Cole bought her a small bouquet of wildflowers from a girl selling them on the street. There were no guests except the preacher's wife and a cowboy named Tom who worked with Cole and served as witness. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed her cheek gently, respectfully, and Elizabeth felt an odd flutter in her chest that might have been hope. They spent their wedding night in separate rooms at the boarding house, an arrangement Cole had insisted on. We will take this slow, he had told her. No pressure, you let me know when you are comfortable with more. His consideration made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She had been prepared for so much worse. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Cole had already hired 2 ranch hands, Tom and a younger man named Billy, to help move his small herd of cattle to the new property. Elizabeth spent the days purchasing supplies for the house, things Cole admitted he had no idea about. Curtains, dishes, linens, cooking pots. He gave her money and trusted her judgment, even though she was terrified of making mistakes. Just get what you think we need, he said. I trust you. Those words settled into her heart like seeds in fertile soil. Trust. It was something she had not experienced in a long time. When they finally rode out to the ranch in a wagon loaded with their belongings, Elizabeth got her first look at what would be her new home. The house was small, a simple 2-room cabin made of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney. It sat in a valley with a creek running through it, and the land stretched out in rolling prairie grass that rippled in the wind like waves on an ocean. The sky overhead was impossibly vast and blue. It was nothing like St. Louis, nothing like anything she had ever known, and it was beautiful in a way that made her throat tight. "It is not much yet," Cole said, watching her face anxiously. "But I can add on to the house, build another room or two, make it better." "It is perfect," Elizabeth said, and meant it. They unloaded the wagon together, and Elizabeth began the overwhelming task of turning the cabin into a home. There was a cast-iron stove that looked intimidating, shelves that needed organizing, and floors that needed scrubbing. Cole worked outside with Tom and Billy, building a corral and checking the property lines. At noon, Elizabeth attempted to make lunch and nearly burned the biscuits beyond recognition. She stared at the blackened lumps in dismay, feeling tears of frustration prick her eyes. Cole came in dusty and tired, took one look at her face and the biscuits, and started laughing. Not unkindly, but with genuine amusement. "Well, I reckon we will not starve, but those might make decent horse feed." Despite herself, Elizabeth laughed too, and the tension broke. "I told you I could not cook." "Good thing I can, a little," Cole said. He rolled up his sleeves and showed her how to mix the dough properly, how to check the oven temperature. They made another batch together, and these turned out golden and edible. They ate them with butter and jam, sitting at the rough wooden table, and Elizabeth thought that perhaps they really could learn together after all. The days developed a rhythm. Cole rose before dawn to work the ranch, and Elizabeth tackled the endless tasks of the household. She learned by trial and error, sometimes succeeding, often failing. She burned stew and oversalted vegetables. She hung laundry on the line and watched it blow away in the wind. She tried to bake bread and created something resembling a brick. But slowly, incrementally, she improved. And Cole was patient, never criticizing, always encouraging. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They talked about everything and nothing. Cole told her about growing up in Texas, about working cattle drives as a teenager, about his dream of building something of his own. Elizabeth found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her father's slow decline, about the loneliness of her life in St. Louis, about the fear that had driven her west. "Do you regret it?" Cole asked one evening, about a month after their arrival. "Marrying me, I mean, coming out here." Elizabeth considered the question seriously. Her hands were rough now, with calluses and small burns. Her back ached from work. The isolation sometimes felt crushing. But when she looked at Cole in the fading light, at the strong lines of his face and the kindness in his eyes, she realized something had shifted inside her. "No," she said softly. "I do not regret it at all." Something changed between them after that conversation. The glances lasted a little longer. When Cole taught her to ride the gentle mare he had bought for her, his hands lingered at her waist as he helped her mount. When Elizabeth mended his shirts, she found herself studying the way they would fit across his shoulders. The attraction had been there from the beginning, simmering beneath the surface of their practical arrangement, but now it began to grow into something deeper. One afternoon in late July, Elizabeth was working in the garden she had planted behind the house when she heard riders approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw 3 men she did not recognize. Something about them made her uneasy. They had a rough, hard look about them, and they were studying the property with calculating eyes. Cole emerged from the barn and walked toward them, his posture tense. Elizabeth moved closer, worried. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Cole asked, his voice level but cool. The lead rider, a man with a scarred face and mean eyes, smiled without warmth. "Heard there was a new spread out here. Came to talk about water rights. That creek runs through your property, but it feeds into the valley below where we run cattle. We need to make sure you are not taking more than your share." "I am not taking anything but what I need," Cole replied, "and I have legal rights to this land and the water on it." "Legal rights can be complicated out here," the man said. "Might be easier if you just agreed to cooperate. Maybe pay a small fee to make sure there are no problems." Elizabeth recognized what this was: intimidation. Extortion. She had seen enough of it in St. Louis, her fear mixed with anger. "I do not pay fees for what is already mine," Cole said, his voice hardening. "I think you should move along now." The scarred man's smile faded. "You are making a mistake, friend. Out here, a man can have all kinds of accidents, fires, stampedes. Would be a shame if something happened to your pretty new wife." Cole's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, and Elizabeth's heart stopped. But before anything could escalate, Tom and Billy appeared from the far pasture, rifles visible in their saddle scabbards. The odds had suddenly evened out. The scarred man looked at them, then back at Cole. "We will be seeing you again," he said, and wheeled his horse around. The three men rode off, leaving a trail of dust. Elizabeth realized she was shaking. Cole came to her immediately, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "Who were they?" she asked. "Trouble," Cole said grimly. "There is a big rancher in the valley, man named Cyrus Dalton. He thinks he owns everything around here, including water he has no legal right to. I knew there might be friction, but I did not think it would start this soon." That night, Cole insisted on showing Elizabeth how to shoot. They went out away from the house, and he taught her to load and fire his spare revolver. The kick surprised her, and her first few shots went wildly astray, but by the end of the session she could at least hit the target sometimes. "I do not want you to be afraid," Cole said as they walked back toward the house under the emerging stars. "But I need you to be prepared. Dalton is not going to let this go." "I am not afraid," Elizabeth said, and realized it was true. "Not anymore. This is our home. We will protect it." Cole stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was intense, searching. "When did you get so brave?" he asked softly. "When I met someone worth being brave for," she replied, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her. He kissed her then, not on the cheek but on the lips, tentative at first and then deeper as she responded. Elizabeth felt like something was awakening inside her, something warm and powerful and right. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Elizabeth," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know this started as an arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became more for me. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach looking so lost and so determined all at once." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have been falling for you every single day, watching you be patient and kind and good. I do not deserve you. You deserve everything," he said fiercely, "and I am going to make sure you have it." That night, their marriage became complete, and Elizabeth discovered that intimacy with someone you loved was nothing like she had feared and everything she had secretly hoped for. Cole was gentle and passionate, attentive to her needs, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Elizabeth felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. The trouble with Dalton came to a head 2 weeks later. Elizabeth was alone at the house, Cole and the hands having ridden out to check the far pastures, when she saw smoke rising from the direction of the creek. She grabbed the rifle and ran, her heart pounding, and found that someone had set fire to the grass near the water source. The flames were spreading quickly in the dry summer heat. She did not hesitate. Using a shovel from the barn, she began beating at the flames, digging a fire line, working with desperate speed. The smoke choked her, and the heat was intense, but she kept going. When Cole and the others returned and saw the smoke, they came at a gallop, and together they managed to contain the fire before it reached the main buildings. Cole pulled her into his arms, his face streaked with soot and fear. "You could have been killed," he said hoarsely. "But I was not," she replied, "and I saved our home." He kissed her hard, right there in front of Tom and Billy, who tactfully looked away. "You are incredible," he said, but they all knew this could not continue. The next morning, Cole rode into town and came back with the marshal, a grizzled man named Garrett who had seen enough frontier justice to be practical about it. He listened to their story, examined the evidence of the fire, and nodded slowly. "I will talk to Dalton," Garrett said. But you need to understand he has money and influence. Unless we can prove it was his men, there is not much I can do legally." "Then what do you suggest?" Cole asked. "Stand your ground. Dalton is a bully, but he is also a coward. He pushes until someone pushes back hard enough that it is not worth it. You got legal rights to this land and that water. He knows it. He is just hoping to scare you off cheap." Garrett looked at Elizabeth with respect. "Seems like you got more backbone than he counted on." The marshal's visit must have had some effect because the direct attacks stopped, but the tension remained. When Cole and Elizabeth went to town for supplies, they could feel the weight of Dalton's influence. Some shopkeepers were friendly, but others were cold, clearly afraid of crossing the big rancher. It was isolating and frustrating, but it also brought Cole and Elizabeth even closer together. They were partners in every sense now, facing the world as a united front. As summer turned to autumn, the ranch began to truly thrive. The cattle were healthy, the grass was good, and Cole's careful management paid off. Elizabeth's skills as a homemaker improved dramatically. She could cook a decent meal now, bake bread that did not double as a doorstop, and manage the household accounts with the same precision she had once used for sewing. More than that, she had discovered a talent for animal husbandry. The chickens she raised produced more eggs than any Cole had seen, and the kitchen garden she tended yielded an abundant harvest. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket against the cooling air, Elizabeth realized she had not thought about St. Louis or her old life in weeks. This was her life now, and she would not trade it for anything. "Cole," she said softly, "I need to tell you something about why I really came west." He had never pressed her for details, but she wanted him to know everything. So she told him the whole truth about the real mail-order bride dying, about assuming her identity, about the forged papers and the debts she was running from. She told him everything, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding, terrified that he would be angry or feel betrayed. When she finished, Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "So you are even braver than I thought. You came here with nothing, risking everything, and you made it work. Elizabeth, I do not care about forged papers or borrowed identities. I care about the woman you are, the woman I know. The one who fought that fire. The one who learns to shoot to protect our home. The one who burns biscuits and laughs about it. That is who I married, and that is who I love." She cried then, not from sadness but from relief and overwhelming gratitude. He held her close and let her tears soak into his shirt, his hand stroking her hair. Winter came to the Kansas prairie with fierce beauty. The first snow fell in November, transforming the land into a white expanse that sparkled under the sun. Elizabeth had never experienced a winter like this, so cold and isolated. For weeks at a time they were snowed in, just the two of them and the livestock that needed constant care. It was hard work, but it was also intimate and precious. They learned each other in new ways during those long winter nights, talking by the fire, making love in their warm bed while wind howled outside, playing cards and reading aloud from the few books they owned. Cole taught her to ice skate on the frozen creek, and they spent a magical afternoon gliding hand in hand under a pale blue sky. Elizabeth fell more times than she could count, and Cole always helped her up, laughing with her, until finally they just lay on the ice together, breathless and happy. "I never knew life could be like this," Elizabeth said, watching her breath form clouds in the cold air. "Happy? Me neither," Cole admitted. "I always thought I would run a ranch alone, married to the work. I never imagined having a partner who made every day better just by being in it." Christmas was simple but perfect. They could not get to town for church services, so they held their own small celebration. Elizabeth made a special dinner from their carefully hoarded supplies, and Cole surprised her with a gift he had hidden away. A beautiful shawl he had bought months ago, soft wool in a deep green that matched her eyes. She gave him a new shirt she had sewn, fitted perfectly to his frame, with careful stitches that represented hours of work by lamplight. As the new year of 1874 began, Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be sure before telling Cole. When she finally did, on a cold January morning, his face transformed with joy so pure it took her breath away. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Our baby," she confirmed, smiling through happy tears. Cole lifted her and spun her around carefully, then set her down and immediately looked worried. "Should I have done that? Is it safe? What do you need? Should we get the doctor?" His anxiety was endearing, and Elizabeth laughed. "I am pregnant, not fragile." "But yes, we should probably talk to Dr. Morrison next time we can get to town." The pregnancy gave them new motivation and new concerns. Cole became even more protective, trying to prevent Elizabeth from doing heavy work, though she insisted she was perfectly capable. They made plans for the baby, deciding to add a room to the house before summer. Cole threw himself into the project, working every spare moment, determined to have everything ready. In March, when the snow finally began to melt and the prairie started to turn green again, they made a trip to town for supplies and to see the doctor. Elizabeth was healthy, the baby was growing well, and they were told to expect the birth in late July or early August. They bought fabric for baby clothes and a cradle that Cole paid extra to have delivered to the ranch. On the way home, they encountered Cyrus Dalton himself on the main street. He was a big man in his 50s, well-dressed and prosperous-looking, with cold eyes that assessed them like livestock. Elizabeth had never met him directly, but she felt instant dislike. "So you are the little folks causing all the fuss," Dalton said, not bothering with pleasantries, still clinging to that patch of dirt. "It is my land legally purchased," Cole replied evenly, "and we are not going anywhere." Dalton noticed Elizabeth and his eyes narrowed as he saw the slight swell of her pregnancy. "Bringing a child into this, that is bold or stupid. This country eats up the weak." "Then it is good we are not weak," Elizabeth said clearly, her chin raised. She would not be intimidated, not by this bully or anyone else. Something like surprise crossed Dalton's face, followed by grudging respect. "Got some spine, I will give you that." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good luck, you are going to need it." As they drove away, Cole reached over and squeezed her hand. "You are magnificent, you know that?" "I learned from the best," she replied, squeezing back. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the garden was planted, and the house addition began to take shape. Tom and Billy helped with the construction, and Elizabeth provided meals and encouragement. The room was finished by June, a perfect nursery with a window facing east to catch the morning sun. Cole built the furniture himself, every piece made with care: the cradle, a changing table, shelves for the baby's things. Elizabeth sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands working the familiar motions while her mind wandered to the future. She imagined a little boy with Cole's blue-gray eyes, or a girl with his determination. She imagined teaching their child to read, watching Cole teach them to ride, raising them in this place they had built together. In July, as her due date approached, Dr. Morrison came to stay at a neighboring ranch, close enough to reach quickly when the time came. Elizabeth was nervous but also ready. Cole was absolutely terrified, trying to hide it and failing completely. She found his worry sweet and reassuring. He cared so much, loved her so much, that the thought of anything happening to her was unbearable to him. The labor started on a hot afternoon in early August, and it was every bit as difficult and painful as Elizabeth had been warned. But Cole was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, giving her water, never leaving her side even though she could see the fear in his eyes. Dr. Morrison was calm and competent, and after hours of hard work, their son was born as the sun was setting, his lusty cry filling the house. Cole wept openly when the doctor placed the baby in his arms, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny red face of his son. "He is perfect," Cole whispered. "Elizabeth, he is perfect." They named him Samuel after Cole's father and called him Sam. He had dark hair, and his eyes would eventually turn the same blue-gray as Cole's. Elizabeth had never known exhaustion like those first weeks of motherhood, but she had never known such joy either. Cole was an attentive father, eager to help with everything from diaper changes to late-night feedings. They were a team in this too, learning together as they had with everything else. As autumn arrived again, marking more than a year since Elizabeth had first come to the ranch, she reflected on how much had changed. The frightened woman who had stepped off that stagecoach barely resembled the person she had become. She was stronger now, more confident, deeply loved and loving in return. She had a home, a husband who adored her, and a beautiful son. The debts that had driven her from St. Louis seemed like another lifetime, problems belonging to a different person. One day in September, Marshal Garrett rode out to the ranch with unexpected news. Cyrus Dalton had died of a heart attack, and his widow was selling off portions of his land empire, including the valley properties. More importantly, the marshal had heard from a colleague in St. Louis. The men Elizabeth had feared, the ones her father had owed, had been arrested for murder and would hang. She was safe. The past was truly over. Cole held her as she processed the news, the final severing of those old chains. "You were always safe here," he said gently, "but I am glad you can feel it now." The years that followed were filled with the beautiful mundane rhythm of life. The ranch prospered, allowing them to purchase additional land and expand their herd. Sam grew from a baby into a curious toddler, then an energetic little boy who followed his father everywhere and charmed everyone he met. When Sam was 3, Elizabeth gave birth to their daughter, Anna, who had her mother's green eyes and auburn hair. Elizabeth often thought about that conversation on their first meeting, when she had nervously admitted she did not know how to be a wife, and Cole had smiled and said they would learn together. They had learned so much more than she could have imagined. They had learned to be partners, to trust each other completely, to face challenges as a united front. They had learned to be parents, to build a home, to create a life from nothing but determination and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, in the summer of 1883, they held a celebration at the ranch. The house had grown over the years, now a proper 6-room home with a real porch and glass windows. Neighbors came from miles around, including many who had been influenced by Dalton's intimidation in the early years, but had since become genuine friends. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. As the sun set and the party continued, Cole pulled Elizabeth away from the crowd, leading her to the creek where they had fought that fire so long ago. The spot had become special to them, a reminder of what they had overcome. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Cole asked, holding both her hands. "That you did not know how to be a wife, I remember," Elizabeth said, smiling, "and you said we would learn together." "We did," Cole said. "We learned everything together, and I have loved every moment of it, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, because they showed me how strong you are, how strong we are together." He pulled her close. "I would marry you again tomorrow and every day after that." "Good thing you do not have to," Elizabeth said, her arms around his neck. "You are stuck with me." "Best thing that ever happened to me, getting stuck with you," Cole murmured against her hair. They kissed as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the sound of the party drifting to them on the warm breeze. Their children were being doted on by friends, their ranch was thriving, and the future stretched before them full of promise. Elizabeth thought back to that desperate woman who had boarded a stagecoach with a stolen identity and a heart full of fear. She had been looking for escape, for survival, for a way out of an impossible situation. What she had found instead was everything she had never known she needed: a home, a purpose, a love that transformed her from the inside out. Cole had once said that sometimes life throws you in a direction you did not expect, and you just have to trust it might work out. He had been right. It had worked out better than she could have dreamed, not because it was easy, but because they had faced it together, learning as they went, growing stronger with every challenge. The years continued to pass in the way years do, bringing changes both small and large. Sam grew into a tall, capable young man who had his father's steady nature and his mother's determination. He loved the ranch and showed a natural talent for working with cattle and horses. Anna was more bookish, always reading, always asking questions, with a quick mind that delighted her parents. When Sam was 12 and Anna was 9, Elizabeth gave birth to twins, two more boys they named Matthew and Thomas, who kept the household in cheerful chaos. Cole's hair began to gray at the temples, and Elizabeth found her own auburn locks threaded with silver, but the years only deepened their love. They knew each other so completely now, could communicate with a glance, could anticipate each other's needs and thoughts. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch but a true partnership, a family, a legacy. The ranch became known throughout the region as one of the best-run operations around. Cole was respected for his fair dealing and his skill with cattle. Elizabeth had become a community leader of sorts, organizing school fundraisers and helping new families get established. The frightened city girl who had not known how to cook a biscuit was now teaching other women how to preserve food, manage accounts, and thrive in this demanding country. When Sam turned 18 in 1891, there was talk of him going back east to college, but he did not want to leave. "This is my home," he told his parents over dinner one night. "This ranch, this land, it is in my blood now. I want to build my life here like you did." Cole and Elizabeth exchanged a look of perfect understanding and pride. This was exactly what they had hoped for, not that their son would feel obligated to stay, but that he would love this place and this life enough to choose it freely. Anna, at 15, had different dreams. She wanted to be a teacher, wanted to attend the normal school in Emporia and come back to teach in the local schoolhouse. Elizabeth supported her completely, remembering her own lack of education and determined that her daughter would have every opportunity. The twins were still young enough to be focused on fishing in the creek and playing with the ranch dogs, but Elizabeth could already see their distinct personalities forming. Matthew was adventurous and bold, while Thomas was quieter and more thoughtful. In 1893, 20 years after that fateful meeting in Abilene, Cole and Elizabeth took a rare trip without the children, leaving the ranch in Sam's capable hands. They traveled to Denver, stayed in a fine hotel, attended a theater performance, and walked the city streets together. It was a reminder of the sophistication they had left behind, but it also reinforced how much they preferred their own life. "Do you ever miss the city?" Cole asked as they watched the sun set over the mountains from their hotel window. "Not even a little," Elizabeth replied honestly. "This is interesting to visit, but our ranch is home. That is where my heart is, where it has been since the day I met you." On their last night in Denver, Cole gave her a gift, a beautiful necklace with a small emerald pendant. "Green for your eyes," he said. "For 20 years of being the best partner, the best wife, the best mother, the best everything, I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." Elizabeth touched the pendant, then pulled him close. "And I love you more than words can express." "You gave me everything, Cole, a home, a family, a life worth living. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "You saved me too," he replied seriously. "I was just going through the motions before you. You made everything mean something. You made me want to build something that would last. You gave me a reason for all of it." They returned home to find that the ranch had run smoothly in their absence, that their children had managed wonderfully, and that nothing catastrophic had occurred. It was a good feeling, knowing that the foundation they had built was strong enough to stand even when they stepped away. As the 19th century drew to a close, the West was changing. Barbed wire crisscrossed the open range, railroads reached everywhere. The wild frontier days were fading into history and legend. But on the Bennett Ranch, the core values remained the same: hard work, integrity, family, love. Sam married in 1896, bringing home a sweet young woman named Sarah who was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Elizabeth welcomed her warmly, teaching her the ways of the household and treating her like the daughter-in-law she had always hoped for. Within a year, Sam and Sarah presented Cole and Elizabeth with their first grandchild, a baby girl named Emma. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Elizabeth felt the circle of life complete itself. She remembered being terrified of holding her own newborn son, afraid she would somehow do it wrong. Now she cuddled Emma with confident ease, marveling at the tiny fingers and perfect features. "You are going to have a wonderful life," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Your grandmother is going to make sure of it." Anna went off to school as planned, excelled in her studies, and returned to teach in the local school. She was popular with her students and their parents, known for her patience and creativity. She eventually married a lawyer from Abilene, a good man named Robert, and though she moved to town, she visited the ranch often, always eager to bring her own children to visit Grandma and Grandpa. The twins, as they grew, showed interest in different paths. Matthew wanted to join the cavalry and see more of the country, while Thomas was fascinated by the new agricultural techniques being developed and wanted to study farming science. Cole and Elizabeth supported both, having learned long ago that children needed the freedom to find their own way. In the summer of 1900, the Bennett family gathered at the ranch for a major celebration. Cole and Elizabeth were renewing their vows on their 27th anniversary, and the whole extended family came together. Children and grandchildren filled the expanded house to bursting. Friends and neighbors traveled from across the region. It was a testament to the life they had built, the community they had fostered, the love they had shared. Standing in front of the preacher again, older now but no less committed, Cole and Elizabeth repeated the vows they had first made to each other in that simple ceremony so many years before. But this time, the words carried the weight of everything they had lived together. "I, Cole Bennett, take you, Elizabeth Hartford Bennett, to be my wife, again, still, always, for every moment of the past 27 years and for every moment yet to come. I, Elizabeth Hartford Bennett, take you, Cole Bennett, to be my husband, again, still, always. You have been my partner, my teacher, my love, and my home. I choose you every day, and I will continue to choose you for all the days we have." There was not a dry eye in the gathering, and when the preacher pronounced them still married, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. That evening, as the party continued under lantern light, Cole and Elizabeth slipped away again to their spot by the creek. It was a beautiful night, warm and clear, with stars scattered like diamonds across the black sky. The water burbled over stones, a constant soothing sound. "I have been thinking," Cole said, his arm around Elizabeth's waist, "about that day we met. About how scared you looked and how I had no idea what I was doing, offering to marry a stranger. Best impulsive decision you ever made," Elizabeth teased. "Best decision, period," he replied seriously. "You know what I think about sometimes. What would have happened if I had not been in town that day? If someone else had met you, or if you had just moved on, we would have missed all of this. We would have missed each other." Elizabeth shivered despite the warm night. It was strange and frightening to think about how much had hinged on that one moment, that one meeting. "But we did not miss it," she said firmly. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to, and we built this life together piece by piece, day by day." "We did," Cole agreed. "And I would not change a single moment of it. Not the hard times or the scary times or the times I thought I might lose you, because it all led to this, to us, to this family and this life. It is more than I ever thought I deserved." "You deserve everything," Elizabeth said, echoing his words from so long ago. "You are the best man I have ever known, the best husband, the best father, the best everything." They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their land, the creek and the cattle and the distant laughter of their family. 27 years had passed since that nervous young woman had admitted she did not know how to be a wife, and the confident cowboy had smiled and said they would learn together. They had learned so much more than either could have imagined. They had learned to love deeply and completely. They had learned that partnership was not about perfection, but about facing imperfection together. They had learned that home was not a place but a feeling, and family was not just blood but choice. As they walked back toward the house, hand in hand as always, Elizabeth looked at the warm light spilling from the windows, heard the sound of her children and grandchildren laughing, felt the solid presence of the man beside her who had been her anchor and her wings for nearly 3 decades. This was what happiness looked like. Not a single perfect moment, but a lifetime of imperfect moments shared with the right person. Cole stopped at the porch steps and pulled her close for one more kiss, tender and deep and full of the love that had only grown stronger with time. "Here is to the next 27 years," he murmured against her lips. "And beyond," Elizabeth replied, smiling, "always and beyond." They joined their family in the house, their hands still linked, their hearts still bound together as tightly as they had been on that improbable day when a desperate woman and a kind cowboy had taken a chance on each other, and discovered that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for, the ones that find you when you need them most, the ones that teach you that learning together is the greatest adventure of all. The Bennett Ranch would continue for generations, passed down through Sam and his children, a legacy of love and hard work and the belief that any two people who care enough can build something lasting. And always, in the family stories told and retold through the years, would be the tale of Cole and Elizabeth, the cowboy and the city girl who met by chance, married in faith, and loved with their whole hearts for all their days. The wild Kansas prairie had been their witness, the harsh land their testing ground, and they had proven themselves equal to every challenge. They had not just survived but thrived, had not just endured but celebrated, had not just learned to live together but to love each other more deeply than either had thought possible. In the end, that was their greatest accomplishment, greater than the successful ranch or the wonderful children or the respected place in the community. They had taken two broken, seeking souls and forged them into something whole and strong and beautiful. They had learned together as promised, and what they learned was that love, real love, the kind that lasts and grows and sustains, is not something you know instinctively. It is something you build day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment together.